This week in the world of sports, the stars and cars of the FIA Formula One World Championship gear up to start another fantastic season. This is the Monday Report, starting now. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday, February 16th, 2026, and this is the Monday Report. I'm your host, H. James K., and today is a very momentous episode. This is the 1-year anniversary of the podcast. Technically, tomorrow is 1 year, but here we are. 1 year. 1 year, 70 episodes. This is the 70th episode. Man, one whole year. It's crazy to me that I've been doing this for so long that it just has become a part of my my routine. It's like work on my book Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Take a break on Friday, and then gear up Saturday, Sunday, and record on Sunday, and then post it on Monday, and start the whole process over again. And it's been crazy. I've definitely refined my craft. I've gotten better at this. I've gotten significantly better technology. I got a better setup, and I really enjoy this. Now, I will admit, I have had to kind of recalibrate my ambition, because part of me wants this to become like a 3-hour multi-topic, like the Rich Eisen show or any other major big podcast. But to be honest with you, I just don't have the energy for it. I don't have the energy because it takes me a long time to write the write-ups for these episodes, because, I do have to have some semblance of a script to know what I'm talking about. It takes a lot of effort to accumulate topics and research those topics and write out things, and it's exhausting. And I found that as much as I enjoyed that kind of format, it began to feel like work, like, I gotta record this week, that kind of thing. So I've pared it back. We're going back to monotopic. I'll probably go back to the college football report in the fall. Probably, who knows? But I talked about this last week, and the thing is, honestly, having gone back to the whole monotopic thing, I found that I was really excited to record this week because, we're talking about racing again. Racing season is here. It's finally arrived. So, yeah, let's get right into it. So today, we are going to be talking about the coming Formula One season. Now, as many of you will know, I already covered this once. I did a kind of, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I did just a really brief, ugly kind of preview. Yeah, and it was a segment. It wasn't an episode. And I talked about, the rules and the engines and everything, but I didn't give you a super detailed intro to all that, because quite frankly, we hadn't had testing yet, so we didn't really know. But now, several weeks later, we've kind of gotten to know some of this stuff more, so I'm going to do a much more in-depth preview of everything, and we will just kind of talk about, changes in constructors, engine manufacturers, driver lineup changes, new teams. I'm going to give a much more detailed explanation of the regulation changes, both on the power unit side and the aerodynamic side. And then we're going to get into what we think we've learned after the first week of testing and the shakedown. And we'll talk about all sorts of stuff there, all the different cars, observations about the teams and the cars. Then I will give you a full 11-team Constructors Championship predictions. All the teams, all 11 of them. And then we're going to get a top 10 Drivers Championship predictions. Then I'm going to get some bold predictions. I got 6 bold predictions. And they've changed a little bit. Things have changed from our perceptions before testing because, reality has kind of caught up to us a little bit. So right off the top, let's jump right into it. All right, off-season changes. So Honda is rejoining with and partnering with Aston Martin. So Honda left their partnership with Red Bull Powertrains after the 2020. They announced that they were leaving in 2023 and sold their previous operation to Red Bull, which created Red Bull Powertrains. But then they kind of changed their mind and were working with Red Bull Powertrains for the last 2 years after 23. But they were kind of half in and half out. And then so this year they've gone away from Red Bull Powertrains and restarted their own Honda Power Unit program, partnering with Aston Martin to make Aston Martin a pseudo Honda Works entry. So Aston Martin has obviously they've got a whole new factory and a new wind tunnel, and they've hired a tremendous amount of mid-level and lower-level staff, and the Honda partnership and everything. And now they've also welcomed a Red Bull designer and former McLaren designer, and Adrian Newey, one of the greatest car designers in the history of Formula One racing. He is now the team principal, but he couldn't really join until about 8-10 months ago because of gardening leave. So he was a bit of a late addition, and Honda was a bit of a late addition because they kind of got a late start on their engine program. So that means this entry is a little underdeveloped, the Aston Martin entry, but we'll get into more of that later. Audi purchased the Kick Sauber team a couple of years ago, and were always going to turn it into a Works Audi entry. Well, last year they took full control over the team under the name of Kick Sauber, but they were still using, I forget whose engine. I think they might have been using Ferrari power units. I can't remember, to be honest with you. But now Audi is in full control. They are known as Audi. They are badged as Audi, and they're making their own car and their own engines now, and gearboxes and everything. They are a Works Audi team. Cadillac is joining Formula One. So this team started life as the Andretti Global and then the Andretti Cadillac entry, but was rejected by Formula One until Andretti sold to Dan Taurus. And then suddenly, magically, the Cadillac entry was welcomed in because Formula One doesn't like Michael Andretti. He's a bit abrasive, so I can kind of understand, but it still was kind of BS. Either way, this is the first new team since Haas in 2016. Cadillac intends to be a full Works team in 2028 when their engine is ready, but right now they run Ferrari engines. They signed Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez as their drivers. They chose those guys because they were experienced, although it is looking very likely that they intend to put Colton Herta in that car, assuming he does well in Formula 2 this year. They'll probably want to put him in, if he does well in Formula 2 this year, they'll probably want to put him in the Cadillac in the next couple of years. All right, Red Bull Ford. So Red Bull, as I mentioned, they split with Honda, and Ford is now partnering with Red Bull Powertrains in a deal that is totally not just a branding deal. Ford wants people to know that this isn't just them badging a Red Bull Powertrains engine, even though it kind of is. Like, they won't explain exactly what they bring other than money, because Red Bull Powertrains still uses their own facilities. They're not using really any Ford facilities. There may or may not be some technical partnership, but we haven't really heard anything definitive about that. So in my book, that's just a branding endeavor. It's just that kind of thing. Red Bull has also, Isaac Hadjar has been moved up, replacing Yuki Tsunoda in the second Red Bull seat. And then Alpine, Renault, Alpine/Renault. So Renault is no longer making engines, meaning that Alpine is now a Mercedes customer team, which is a total upgrade because the Renault engine was an absolute dog. It was really bad. It was really underpowered, and it wasn't as good. So Alpine has definitely gotten an upgrade in that sense, but it remains to be seen how committed Alpine and Renault are. And then Racing Bulls, rookie Arvid Lindblad will be replacing Isaac Hadjar at Racing Bulls. And And the final one, can't forget this one, the partnership between Haas F1 and Toyota Race in the Toyota Racing division has strengthened. We have seen a more involvement from Toyota this year, to the point where the Haas F1 entry runs the TGR livery on the engine cover. I think this is leading till eventually Toyota is going to buy the car from Gene Haas, and they're gonna buy the team, and I think they're gonna be a Toyota team again, a works Toyota team. I think that's coming. Now there's nothing to support that, but I think that's definitely coming. All right, let's move over to the regulation changes. So let's start with power units. So the new power units are the same 1.6-liter turbocharged V6 engines, but this time they do not have the MGU-H. So the MGU-H is the motor generator unit heat. And what it would do is it would take excess heat coming off of the turbocharger and turn that into electricity that it would use with the whole hybrid system. But they took it off because, well, the MGU-H is freaking expensive, and it's really complicated, and it's not road relevant, so nobody has ever been able, no one's put it in a car because it's too expensive to make it work. So, as a means to get Cadillac and Audi and Honda to come in, they got rid of the MGU-H. The new power units will have a 50-50 split between internal combustion engine power and electrical energy, with the MGU-K, that's the motor generator unit kinetic, contributing 470 horsepower up from the 160 that it contributed last season. Now, how that worked is it would take energy drawn from under braking. So whenever you would hit the brakes, it would generate electricity near the brake rotors, and that goes to the batteries and charges the batteries. Well, last year that was 160 horsepower, and this year that is now 470. Meanwhile, the engine itself will now contribute 540 horsepower, down from 850 last year. F1 has also moved to fully sustainable fuels, which, that doesn't really mean anything, but yay, climate science, I guess. The power units now have an overtake mode instead of a DRS. So I'll talk about the whole DRS going bye-bye, but what this basically means is that when the driver wants to make an overtake, like a DRS-style overtake, they use the overtake mode, and it uses additional energy to give the driver more power to overtake a car ahead of them, assuming they're within 1 second, which is essentially DRS. So now, if you're in the zone, you use the overtake mode instead of DRS, because DRS is no more. And I'll explain some of the complications with the new power units later. We'll get to that a little down the road. But on the aerodynamic and general design philosophy, as I said, DRS is no more. Instead, both the front and the rear wings open to reduce drag. So how this works is DRS, the rear wing is the same. It's the same DRS flap as it was, but now it doesn't have to open upwards like it has been. As we've seen, the Alpine car, the rear wing flap goes backwards, flattening out instead of lifting up the front end. Now, what we've also seen is there is no real set rule on where the actuator for the front wing has to be. So most teams have it in the nose, and then because basically the rear one or two elements of the front wings flatten out. So like you have the actuator in the nose facing backwards, and it would just, if you have it in the center line of the nose, it just pushes down on the rear wing elements from the center line. But some teams have done it where they have one actuator on either side. So like if you were looking at the wing from the front, you'd have the nose, and that kind of divides the front wing up into two sections. Well, in the middle of both of those two sections on either side, you'd have an actuator. So it'd be like, say, if it was like the nose was 10 inches, then you had like 10 inches of wing, and then 3 inches of actuator, and then 10 inches of wing, and then the end plate. That's kind of how it works on both sides now. And the end plate of the front wing is not spec, but there are serious, like, you have to have this plate and this kind of vortex generator, and then you're going to have one other element. And that's how, and everyone has their own answer for what that element's got to look like, but that's how all the front wings look. Now, what's interesting is not only are there some teams who have done 2 active actuators versus 1 actuator, there are a couple of teams, the biggest one being Mercedes, that they put the support beam for the front wing not on the frontmost element, like if you had, where the 2 structural things that connect the front wing to the nose. So instead of those being on the frontmost wing element of the 3 like normal, theirs is on the second element, meaning that the only element of their car that goes down is the third and backmost front wing element. That's very different than anyone else. There might, like Audi might do that, but I don't remember if Audi does it as well. Some teams have been they brought updates to a Bahrain testing, so we're kind of it's very fluid. We'll see at Melbourne if Melbourne will be the first really definitive test, but it's been interesting because there's no real super definitive like orthodoxy. The front wings are all over the place. Further back in the car, the ground effect floors of last year, the really uber sculpted floors, have gone away. They've got a super sculpted front of the floor inlet, and then the diffusers are wide open, but the rest of the floor is flat. There's the big Venturi tunnel from last year is gone because they want to get rid of porpoising. Now, personally, I think they should have kept it and then just gone to active suspension to get rid of the porpoising, but you know how this is. I don't make the rules. But either way, so the floors are relatively flat now. There's much less ground effect downforce. They've also added a kind of a barge boardy kind of element behind the front wheels that is supposed to direct air inward towards the inlet for the underbody, but it can be up to 3 elements, and a lot of teams have used it to help with they call it inwashing instead of outwashing. Outwashing is pushing all the air outside of the front tires and away from the car. Well, a lot of teams now are doing inwashing towards the Coke bottle section to like energize the air going across the Coke bottle section and the diffuser and that kind of thing. So like what a lot of the teams are doing is they'll have 1 or 2 of the elements, because it basically like the frontmost part of this inwashing barge board thing is equal to the outside edge of the tire. And then the inmost edge, they kind of dive inward about 8 inches, like diagonally, if you can kind of picture that in your head. So what teams have kind of done, and everyone's got their own answer for this, is usually it's like one team had basically the front edge of their floor kind of acts as a 4th element to kind of energize the boundary between the floor and the ground to kind of seal the floor to the ground. Other teams have done it to create vortexes to energize the inwashing around the underside of the side pods towards like the Coke bottle area. McLaren's got a really big element that kind of does that, but also does just like pushing air towards the floor. Everyone's got their own solution. And then moving even further back, a new thing we're seeing this year is a hole in the diffuser. So for those who don't know, the rear of the car, the underbody, has this giant area called a diffuser where basically the floor curves upwards just under the suspension. And what this does is it creates an acceleration zone for the air using the whole Bernoulli principle. So what it does is, and you would have like walls on the ends of this diffuser to accelerate and pressurize the air to make downforce. Excuse me, need to take a drink. Excuse me. Oh, that's better. So what we're seeing this year is people are putting a hole in the, like, right where the Coke bottle section of the car gets to the rear wheels and the suspension and the the beginnings of the diffuser, teams are putting a hole right there instead of keeping that solid wall to basically energize the diffuser with the inwashing air around the Coke bottle section. This is new. We've never seen. We haven't seen something like this in a long time. It reminds me of the whole like Braun GP 2009 double diffuser kind of stuff. So it's interesting. Almost everyone has it. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else aerodynamically about the car. Last year they had that little fin over the front tires. Those are gone. And teams are allowed to create their own wheel covers now. The spec ones are gone. What else is different? The rear wing has an actual end plate now. It doesn't just the element doesn't just kind of wrap around into the end plate. I thought that looked kind of cool, but they went away with that. They went back to a more traditional end plate. So that's kind of aero. Now, from a more structural thing, the cars are 10 inches shorter in length and 4 inches narrower in width than before, and they have narrower tires. Now, this is the biggest reduction in size the Formula One cars have had in a long time, and I'll be honest, they look so good. They look so much better. They're so much smaller. Like 4 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a pretty dramatic change in size. They look right. Now, admittedly, they are not nearly small enough. If it was me, I'd take another 5 or 10 inches off the length, and I'd probably take another 4 inches off the width and really get them back to that like 90s, early 2000s size, but they'll never do that because you couldn't make it work with the hybrid and safety. Either way, the cars are smaller, and they are now 30 kilograms or 66 pounds lighter than they were last year. So the cars are smaller, they're lighter, they have smaller tires. It has all kind of worked together to kind of overcome the fact that the cars are really energy starved, which we'll get to in a second. So now moving on to what we think we've learned after the first week of testing and the week of shakedown in Madrid. Nobody wants to be the fastest team in testing. Mercedes looks like they're clearly the fastest team, but they and some of their customer teams claim that Red Bull is actually the fastest. Meanwhile, Red Bull claims that Mercedes is sandbagging in hopes that their engine compression trick won't get banned. I'll talk about that in a second. McLaren says they are only the fourth fastest because they aren't a works team and are at a disadvantage. And then Ferrari obviously claims to have nothing for Mercedes, even though their car looks super consistent and is really reliable. All right, back to the whole engine compression trick. So, the rules for the engines stipulated that last year the engines could have a compression ratio of 18-1. This year, that has been changed to 16-1, and that was supposed to be the end of it. And then, for some reason, Formula One changed the rule back in October, adding the line that to be tested at ambient temperature. Well, the fact that it's specified at ambient meant some teams, Red Bull and Mercedes, cough, cough, said, well, then that just means that at ambient it has to be 16, but it can be 18-1 anywhere else. So they've developed this kind of metallurgical technique where their engine cylinders compression ratio changes as the engine gets hot, which increases the ratio to 18-1, and for those who don't know, the higher compression ratio, the more power you can possibly get from the engine, but there are knock-on effects like knocking, premature detonation, and that kind of thing. And obviously stress on the engine's materials. So the whole 16-1 thing was done to cut cost and cut complexity for the newcomers. But Mercedes knows that the benefits of going to 18-1. So they've invented this trick that we don't really quite understand yet of how when their car gets hot, their cylinders just have a different compression ratio. Allegedly. They haven't admitted that this is anything, and I guess Red Bull have technically figured it out as well, but they won't admit it. And their engines look to clearly be the best engines. Now, there's very much been a row over this. Ferrari and Audi, Cadillac, Haas. I mean, everyone who's not a Mercedes customer team kind of wants this rule changed. Now, admittedly, if you just change the measurement scenario of like, well, we're going to, we've come up with a way to measure this at race temp, then, we're like 2 weeks from the start of the season, so that could be a serious problem for Mercedes. What I think is more likely is it's going to be much like the dual-axis steering thing that Mercedes came up with, where if you pull the steering wheel back, it changed the toe in of the tires in the front, so you could like pull them back to widen up the toe to alleviate tire heating on the straights, and then push the wheel back in to increase the toe to help with braking and turn in. And that was a thing for 1 year, because in the middle of the season, Formula 1 said, yeah, we're banning that next year. We're not going to make you take it off now, but next year that's going to be banned. I think this compression thing is going to change in 27, but for 26, I have a feeling this thing is going to continue. Now, McLaren, as I mentioned, McLaren said they think they are only the fourth fastest because they aren't a works team. So the disadvantage, even though they're a Mercedes customer team and they're entitled to the same engines that Mercedes gets and data, I guess, is the fact that they don't get that data as quickly as Mercedes does. So they're at a disadvantage when it comes to like energy management, fuel flow, all of those kind of things. So that in McLaren's eye, that's the disadvantage of being a customer team. And there is a certain amount of truth to that, because as a customer team, you cannot design the engine architecture around the design of your car. So like, for instance, Honda and Aston Martin have gone with this kind of size zero, super tight packaging. Now, there are some problems with that, and I'll get to that in a second. But that's only possible from an aerodynamic standpoint because they were able to design the engine in concert with Honda to be size zero. So from McLaren, they can't do that because they just have to take the engine and gearbox that Mercedes develops and just kind of figure out how to work that with their car. Either way. All right. This was a kind of a new one. So this has been a topic of discussion. I guess it was a topic of discussion back in October, but Ferrari poo-pooed it. So the start procedures could be an issue. So the turbocharger is used while on the starting grid to charge the battery. You do this by getting, on the revs, when you're really on the rev limiter. That high revs allows the turbocharger to charge the batteries on the starting blocks. So as they're banging away on the limiter, so to speak, they can charge the battery. The problem comes when it takes a while to spin up the turbocharger. Now that, forgive me, I had a coughing fit just take over me there for a second. Anyway, as I was saying, in years past, in this turbo hybrid era, they would use the MGU-H to quickly spin up the turbocharger during race starts. But the MGU-H, and they would also use it to help charge the battery while on the starting blocks. But now that the MGU-H has been removed due to costs and development, headaches and everything, it's up to the engine itself to spin up the turbos to help charge the battery. So, because the MGU-H drew energy off of excess heat from the turbo, it was like you could more readily generate electricity to the battery quicker on the starting line, and the MGU-H would help spin up the turbo. So it was you were kind of getting a 2-for-1. Well, that's gone now. This means that it can take up to 10 seconds of continuously revving the engine to spin up the turbo and charge the battery. So 10 seconds now. And you're ready to go. Think about that. That is how long they would have to sit on the starting line right now, theoretically, if the practice starts are to be believed that we saw in Bahrain testing. Think of how long that is. Now that comes with a whole host of issues. Namely is the fact that when they do the warm-up lap, they just come to the starting grid, start, stop, wait, the lights go out and they're off. Well, if you're on the pole and you get to the starting blocks first, it can take 10 seconds for the rest of the field to pack up behind you. That's time that you can spend, spinning up, spinning up the revs and building the revs and engine and power and charging. But if you're Cadillac and you're in 22nd place, you can't do that. You may not even hardly get any time to spin it up at all by the time you get to the starting grid. It can be like you start 1,000, 2, 1,000, and you're off. That's the problem. And not only this, that poses a problem from a fairness standpoint, but there's another issue. You can't rev the turbo and the engine. You can't rev the engine too high, though, because if you rev the engine, it doesn't charge if you rev it too aggressively, it doesn't charge the engine. So you have to rev it high, but not too high. But if you don't rev it high enough, it won't charge. But if you rev it too high, it won't charge either. So there's like this weird butter zone. But it takes forever to get it in the range. And then you got to keep it in the range with moderating the revs and all this. And it's super complicated. And as they saw, half of, I think it was 8 cars. I didn't watch it because I don't subscribe to F1 TV. I don't even think that's available in America. But they were broadcasting during Bahrain testing, and they showed this practice start, and 8 cars were there. The Alpine spun and almost crashed, and half of the other cars didn't even get off the line. So people are rightfully concerned about the starting procedure. Now, this could lead to a situation where, say, somebody in the middle messes up the procedure so they have no battery power on the start. And they messed up the revving, so they're just shit out of luck. And then they just caught dead on the starting grid with cars blasting up around them, and you get a collision, or maybe you get to the first turn and everyone else has battery and you don't, and there's a huge speed delta and you get crashed into from behind. There's a whole host of safety issues that could theoretically come up. Now, this all might just be, hot air that doesn't mean anything in Melbourne in March, early March, when the first race is. But it has become a topic of discussion. Like McLaren boss Andrea Seidel, he says that they need to change the rules and address this to make sure that there isn't half the field is dead on the starting line. But Ferrari says, no, nay. We raised this issue back in October, and we were all shut down. So we've built our car to take care of this problem. So now you can't have a rule change now, because that's an advantage that we have, that we designed our car to mitigate those circumstances. So it's a whole thing, and we kind of have a feel. We suspect that Ferrari did design their car in a way to kind of mitigate this, where we believe the Ferrari has a smaller turbo than other teams, because there's no prescribed turbo size that you can use whatever size turbo you want. So there is suspicion that the Ferrari has a smaller turbo that's easier to rev, which comes with its own problems and drawbacks, but we believe that is a design choice they've made deliberately to help with starts, whereas other teams didn't, because they either didn't foresee this issue or figured it would get changed or whatever. So it's a whole thing. Now, admittedly, I think it's probably going to be nothing, and they're all going to get off the line in Australia, and it's going to be like, oh, we were all foolish, but it's definitely a narrative. Now we got to talk about all of the criticism. So people are not happy with the rules. So Lewis Hamilton has complained about how complicated the cars are to drive. He said that it might look easy on television, but you basically need a degree to understand what's going on in the car, because the cars are so complicated, and between fuel management, tire management, energy management, charging, working on the active aero, maintaining all the systems, keeping everything in the right operating zones. The cars have never been more complicated to drive, and he says it's too complicated. Fernando Alonso has criticized the cars because they are, in his words, up to 50 kilometers per hour slower in the corners than before, largely due to having to coast so much, claiming that a chef could drive them because they are so easy. Now, because of the active aero, cars are going a hell of a lot faster into turns, but they have significantly less downforce on turn-in before the wings come back up and everything. So cars are going significantly slower into turns, even though they're going ridiculously fast in the straights. So it's very much the cars are unsettled and slow in the corners and really fast, and in Fernando's mind, that is easy. Max Verstappen has come out harshly against the cars, saying that the energy-starved power units don't allow a driver to just drive. He's criticized the fact that the driver is mostly monitoring systems and making sure everything is functioning correctly instead of attacking. Max has also come out harshly against the fact that it seems like they'll be lifting and coasting as early as 2/3 of the way down some of the straightaways on the season. Max further claims that the cars are anti-racing and akin to a beefed-up Formula E car. He says that the cars aren't fun to drive. He claims that at this point in his career, winning isn't enough and enjoying what he's driving matters. So, apparently many drivers feel this way to some extent, but fear punishment for voicing their displeasure, but Max is Max. So he'll say these things. So to kind of unpack a lot of these claims, the monitoring system of things, that's a fair criticism that everyone has kind of acknowledged, that the cars are super complicated. The lifting and coasting thing, we have kind of seen this. So you have to keep the revs high to keep the turbo spool to recharge the battery. So what we're seeing is, how do I explain this? So when you go, when these cars, they have like 8 gears, these Formula 1 cars. So if you're coming off a long straightaway and you got a downshift, go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, bang, 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 bang down the gears. Well, some of the new meta as it is you go down, down, pause, down, down, pause, down, down, pause, down, down. You pause every couple of gear shifts to keep the revs up to get a little bit of charging in there as you're decelerating and all this. Now, admittedly, this whole charge, that might be 3.5 seconds instead of 2 seconds, but the point still stands that it is different. And you're seeing a lot of cars are lifting way early going in because you got to coast to let the KERS system do a lot of the recharging because, all right, I'm going to kind of go on a bit of a rant to explain why the engines are so energy starved. Okay. So in this kind of system, when you want to have a close to 50-50 power split, you need to have a means to quickly and efficiently charge the engines. Now, in the World Endurance Championship and in IMSA, this is done by having energy regeneration done on the front axles and the rear axles. Formula 1, they just do it on the rear axles. Now, Audi has a World Endurance Championship team. They have like a hypercar program. So they have extensive, or at least they did, they have extensive experience in front axle power regeneration. So when it was announced that they were going to be joining Formula 1, they said, well, if you're doing these rules, you need to have charging on both front and rear ends. Otherwise, it won't, you'll never be able to charge, and you'll never be able to charge quickly enough to make it worth it. Well, Mercedes said, absolutely not. We're not doing front axle because Audi will have an unfair advantage because they're the only ones who have really developed that kind of thing. I mean, that's BS. I mean, Toyota's done it. I'm pretty sure Ferrari has done it. But Mercedes didn't want a competitor to come in with an advantage, so the cars don't generate any electricity from their front brake rotors, only the rear. And they also don't have the MGUH because the MGUH is expensive and complicated and hard to develop. So what does this mean? Instead of having the MGUH and front and rear energy development, or just front and rear energy generation, they have only one of the three. So it's like you get 33% of the possibilities. So these cars have a significant amount of power coming from a hybrid that is never charged enough. So what we're seeing is the engines are underpowered. They had 850, now they have 540, which is like, that's embarrassing. For a Formula One car, that's just embarrassing. But it is what it is. But what it also means is that when you don't have battery power, you are significantly down on power now. So what we're seeing is these cars are significantly slower, like 2 seconds minimum, 3 seconds on track than they would have been last year. And because the cars are so energy starved, drivers are having to stop pushing and start saving and coasting and generating electricity so that they'll have it when they need it. So what this means is, like, if you use the override button or whatever to do an overtake and you expend a lot of energy and you don't make it stick, you have burnt an exorbitant amount of energy for nothing. And now you are going to be punished wildly. So what this likely means is, these knock-on effects change behavior. So what we might see is people just don't attack unless they are absolutely for sure guaranteed to make it work, which obviously leads to even less passing and overtaking in Formula One compared to normal. And they already don't have enough of it in Formula One. So you can kind of see where the problems come with. So now we have a car that doesn't have enough power from the engine and doesn't have enough energy generating power to keep the battery charged, to keep the power up. So when this became when it became notable that this was going to happen, that's when Formula One came up with we'll do active aero. We'll reduce drag on the straights so that we don't have to expend as much power to go fast. That's why they did active aero, because they've been hesitant to do fully active aero for years. But they knew that they needed to reduce drag. That's why they went to the smaller tires and the smaller car, because this new engine formula doesn't have enough power. It doesn't have enough power, it doesn't have enough energy generation. It's not up to the task. Now, if this had been like a 60-40 or a 70-30 or a 65-35 split where it's mostly engine power and like 300 horsepower from the hybrid system, then maybe you could make it work. But this amount of power, you don't have the power to do it. It's not going to work. So what we're seeing is energy-starved cars that require lots of lift and coast and very, very, very little attacking. It's a mess. And because drivers like Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso and Max Verstappen have voiced their displeasure, it has led many to speculate that the 26-27 offseason might see a rash of retirements. Lewis, Alonso, Max, maybe. Do you lose all three of them? Because it is no secret that Max Verstappen enjoys iRacing and racing other kinds of cars more than he does Formula One. Now, he makes $65 million a year in Formula One, so that's a lot of incentive to do something on fun. But maybe if you're someone like him and you've made tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars over the years, maybe you say, I've done everything I want to do in Formula One. I don't want to spend my racing career while I'm in my prime driving something I don't like. That there is a possibility he might think that. And if you're a guy like Lewis Hamilton, and especially Fernando Alonso was almost 40 years old. He's had a long career. I mean, people have to remember that Fernando Alonso has been driving continuously since the early 2000s. So it's one of these things where this might be the year that pushes a lot of older guys out of the series. Maybe not, maybe not. But it has definitely been a thing. Now, at the same time, McLaren's Lando Norris has said that Max is being hyperbolic and that and if he dislikes the car, then he can just retire and give up that $65 million paycheck that he makes. Now, that was the insinuation. In reality, Lando said, well, if he dislikes it, he can retire. But the insinuation is he can give up the money and blah, 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 blah. At the same time, the head of Formula E has come out criticizing Max, saying that he's welcome to come and check out the 4th generation of the Formula E car and see how great the car actually is. The car looks cool, but it's still Formula E, and I'm still just honor-bound to hate it. Sorry. Other than the engine start, power units, and everything, passing could be extremely challenging. Haas F1's Esteban Ocon and Oliver Behrman have both expressed pessimism over the difficulty to overtake in the new cars. Ocon explained that the new aerodynamics don't help all that much when trailing a car, even though that was the point. While they do reduce the drag, the cars have so little downforce that you can't make use of the reduced drag. So it's as if you're just in the same spot. And because the cars are so energy starved, you can't really push. So Ferrari's Charles Leclerc said that overtaking is extremely costly from an energy standpoint. I've explained this and this is way more than in years past. So when I explained how, if you don't make it stick, you're just out of battery and you're a sitting duck, that's what Leclerc is referring to. So it's a bit of a mess. Now, in 2 weeks or a week and a half or whatever it is, I'm going to look it up. Maybe in a couple of weeks when the Melbourne Grand Prix starts, we'll just see that this isn't an issue. Maybe the racing will be amazing and it'll be super racy and everything, but until then, it looks like an absolute clusterfuck. Excuse my language. So, by the way, the Melbourne Grand Prix is on March 8th, in Australia. So, we're only a couple of weeks away. All right, observations about teams and their cars after the first Bahrain test and the Madrid shakedown. Ferrari doesn't look the most stable and has to stay in second gear to keep the revs up in the corners versus other cars that can shift all the way down to first gear. This is likely evidence of a smaller turbocharger, as I said earlier. They have been using the same engine since the beginning of their shakedown, which is incredible. It's something like 5+ race distances on one engine, more than that, and they haven't had any engine issues, because in Formula 1 testing, they use one car. They don't bring both cars to the testing, only the one. So, the fact that while the car doesn't look incredibly rock solid stable like last year's cars, it's looked very consistent, and it has had very, very few stops on track, and it's notable. Audi appears to really struggle with turn-in and looks very soft. So by soft, they mean how the car is sprung and mechanical grip and that kind of thing. Last year and in the ground effect era, you had to run your cars very, very, very stiff because any amount of bouncing and oscillation and body movement influences how much downforce you generate. So you needed cars that were really stiff and consistent when on their ride height. So the Audi looks much, much, much softer from that kind of thing, and it really struggles on a turn-in. That's very much a brake bias, grip, how it handles the turns. There's been a lot of lockups into turns in this new rule set, so that is very much a thing. The car, by all accounts, looks very much like a midfield entry at the best. It does not look like a race-winning car. Red Bull. Red Bull looks very quick with lots of running and good reliability. Yeah, this car has been doing a ton of running in the shakedown and the first Bahrain test. The car struggles with a hint of instability on turn-in, but that looks like a common characteristic more than anything that's kind of singling out in the Red Bull. They just kind of all struggle with turn-in stability. Isaac Hadjar looks to be getting on well with the car, which is encouraging after everyone struggled in the second Red Bull car in both 24 and 25. Alpine. That Alpine has never looked... It doesn't look as composed as the top four teams. That's, McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. But it does look clearly better than the Williams, which is the other kind of midfield contender on both corner entry and exit the car. And this should be because Alpine didn't develop their car in 25. They just didn't. They brought out their car that was essentially the same car as the 24 car and just kind of said, yeah, we're going to finish last in the constructors, but that's the idea. They did the F1 equivalent of tanking for the number one pick. And if it works out, then their car is going to be a significantly better midfield contender. They're not going to be a race-winning threat every week, but maybe they sneak one in, maybe they don't. Either way, they do look superior to the Williams, which is definitely their main competitor. All right, Mercedes. This car looks incredibly sedate, almost boring, which is a good thing because that boring and smooth is fast. So the greatest analogy of this is on old Top Gear. The guy, Rowan Atkinson, who played Mr. Bean, he was in their star in a reasonably priced car where they would put him in some tiny British sedan, and they would go around the Top Gear test track and they listed all the different celebrity times, and Rowan Atkinson's pass looked so unbelievably slow and sedate, and then it was the fastest time they'd ever seen to that point. And his record stood for years and years before Matt LeBlanc passed him up. But the thing is, his run was smooth and sedate and boring because that's fast. When you see cars that are slipping and sliding all over the place and they're really struggling, that's not fast. It looks exciting, but it's not fast. That is wasted movement, wasted energy, wasted effort. So the fact that the Mercedes Formula One car looks boring on track, that is deadly. Now, admittedly, the car has had a couple of instances where they've had a brake line lock up or they've missed a turn, but it's nothing like Aston Martin or Red Bull or any of these other cars. Their car just looks rock solid, not to mention fast as hell. The Mercedes engine appears to be by far the most powerful, and the car looks to be by far the most stable and consistent. So, it looks like the Mercedes team has really nailed it. All right, Cadillac. The newest team's car just looks like it lacks grip. The car doesn't have any really evil tendencies. It doesn't, have snap understeer and snap oversteer and inconsistent on which one it's going to happen, and it doesn't, it doesn't do anything crazy. It just looks like it's low on grip. Now, this isn't surprising because Cadillac was kind of late to the party. Now, they didn't have to develop a car last year, so they've been able to focus more of their resources, but they still kind of got a late start on when they could develop the new car. So, it's one of these things where it wouldn't surprise me if their car is a year behind, so to speak, if it takes them a year to kind of get aerodynamically where they need to be. Now, hopefully Cadillac can speed up the development process and overcome that within this year. But right now, the car looks a little undercooked and it looks a little low on grip. Now, maybe once they add grip, that exposes some other handling characteristics that are less than advisable, but we don't know. The car just looks low on grip right now. McLaren looks to be behind Merc, Ferrari, and Red Bull, but is clearly a contender and is well clear of the midfield. The car struggles with stepping out on drivers from time to time, but Piastri seems to struggle with that more than Lando, so that might just be one driver struggling to acclimate to how the car needs to be driven more than any kind of characteristic with the car. That remains to be seen. These are all just observations we've seen on track. We don't know the real pecking order as of yet. Who knows? Because the other thing is we don't know how much fuel these guys are running and what tire they're on. We do, but they're all running a different program. So until we see them in practice and qualifying, we just won't know what car is the best. It's all kind of conjecture. Moving on to Haas. The Haas car looks unremarkable and didn't make many headlines, which is a good thing. The car looks a little slow on grip, a little low on grip, but it didn't show signs of any evil tendencies, and it didn't have many mistakes. It just looked kind of meh, whatever, which is a good thing because my gosh, a couple of years ago, Haas, it was like they just didn't even arrive. They were like, yeah, our car is really bad, and anyway, it's just they were really bad, and the cars were evil and hard to drive. So if their car is just what it is, that's good compared to what happened in the past. All right, Aston Martin. This car looks evil and slow. If the car isn't locking up the front tires on turn-in, then it locks up the rears on turn-in. And the car will sometimes even do both, where it'll lock up one on entry and lock up the other on exit at random. It'll switch from one to the other. When the car isn't locking up and missing corners, it just looks slow. To tell you how slow this car is, Lance Stroll, who is the son of the owner of the team, do with that information what you will, he said that their car is up to 4.5 seconds slower than the leaders per lap. 4.5 seconds. That puts them behind Cadillac in testing. That's how slow their car apparently is. And Fernando Alonso agreed with this. He wasn't much faster. Their car, not only is it horrifically unstable and evil and unpredictable, it's slow. Now, what's interesting about this is Adrian Newey, he did his size 0 super compact packaging, and the car had really aggressive tiny side pods and all this other stuff. People were like, oh man, that car looks really fast. But then they showed up late to the Madrid shakedown and barely did any running, and they had issues, which left them behind. And now they played catch up in the first week of Bahrain testing, but they were never fast, and they struggled with setup and just everything. The car is just horrible. So now it remains to be seen, is this just they got behind the 8 ball and they're struggling to rein in the car and it's going to get better? Or is this just what the car is? And this hasn't even gotten to the fact that the Honda power unit looks to be awful. Right now, they are running at a cap of 10,000 RPMs. Technically, the official rev limit of the series is 15,000 RPMs, but everyone else runs at about 12 or 13. 12 really. Honda's running at about 10,400. That's kind of the hard cap on what they're wanting their engine because they're struggling with cooling and reliability, and I guess the engine is really down on power. So not only is the engine unreliable and hard to cool, it's low on power. Not only is the car hard to cool, get cooling air in, it's unstable, unpredictable, draggy, and slow. This is the recipe for getting no points all season. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably, maybe not. But it's one of these things where the car just looks bad. Everything about the team looks bad. I guess there's rumors that Lawrence Stroll, the owner of the team, just lit into mechanics and engineers and the designers at the base because he spent serious money building a new facility, a new factory, new wind tunnel, new everything. So he is expecting his car to win, and they're the antithesis of winning right now. Oh, and not only this, the Honda car, the engine struggles in the low gears, which might mean that it struggles to regenerate energy. So, as if they didn't have enough problems. All right, moving on to Racing Bulls. The car looks erratic. It often struggles with inconsistent corner entry, the same as several other cars. It looks like a poorly designed midfield car. Nothing really to say. Williams did not show up to the the Madrid shakedown. The car wasn't ready. They didn't go. They led the Bahrain test in mileage. They did more laps, more distance than anyone else. The car didn't look all that inspiring, but it was very consistent, and it didn't have a lot of reliability issues, and it just ran and ran and ran and ran and ran, which is something to take note of. All right, now let's move on to predictions. It's taken us an hour to get here, but let's move on to predictions. All right, let's do a full 11-team Constructors Championship prediction. So, coming in at 11th and last, I have Aston Martin. Yep, not Cadillac, the new team, but Aston Martin. What I think, the reason why I'm saying this is because I think Cadillac is going to come in with rock bottom expectations, and they're just going to say, whatever we do is what we do this year. It's more about development and learning and building up a team that can function in the future. Aston Martin is like, no, we got to be better, and the pressure's going to be on, and we know how frustrated Fernando Alonso can get. You know, he called the McLaren Honda of 2015 a GP2 engine, and the car was so bad in 2017 that they were willing to let him skip the Monaco Grand Prix to run the Indy 500 to cheer him up because he wanted to be in a car that wouldn't blow up. Now, admittedly, that Honda blew up in Indianapolis, but still, that's how bad that was. This is very much the same thing. So, with Aston Martin, this thing could unravel bad. Like, Lance Stroll continues to be not a great driver, and Fernando Alonso struggles with the car to drive it, and the car's reliability is horrible, and there's pressure from Lawrence Stroll, and things are just going bad to worse, and it can just snowball into a horrible season. We've seen this before. So, Aston Martin, 11th. Coming in at 10th, Cadillac. I think this is only going to be because Aston Martin's going to get no points all year, and Cadillac is going to get 1 10th place finish and finish like 1 point ahead of them. I have a bold prediction to that effect where basically I think Cadillac and Aston Martin could finish within 5 points of each other, 1 point of each other. I think it's going to be neck and neck for who's the worst. I'm going to be pulling for Cadillac, but I can't deny the fact that they're going to be slow. They're going to be slow. It's hard to develop an F1 car, and it's hard for, like, Haas F1 has never gotten competitive. They've been in since 2016, and they've never even gotten close. Now, part of that is because Gene Haas doesn't spend on his team, but it's also the fact that it's freaking hard to get competitive. So, coming in at number 9, speaking of not competitive, Audi. The former Kick Sauber team, now Audi Works team, is they're going to be slow. And that's, I don't think they're going to be that good. Now, I think they're going to get a couple of points finishes here and there to kind of get them some points, but I don't have a lot of faith in them, their ability to be a contender even for midfield contention. So I just think they're going to be bad. The car doesn't look great, and they've struggled with some cooling, I guess, and reliability. And the engine, I guess, it isn't Honda bad, but the engine's not great. So something to keep in mind. All right, coming in at number 8, Haas F1. So this car, Haas F1, I have them in 8th because, quite frankly, it isn't because I think they're going to be bad. I just think that other teams ahead of them in the midfield are going to be better. The car looks pretty sedate. I like the drivers they've got, but at the end of the day, I just think other teams are better. Speaking of other teams, number 7, Racing Bulls. So this would be kind of disappointing, considering I think the Red Bull engine's going to be pretty solid, and their car was okay last year, but I think they're going to take a step back, to be honest with you. Number 6, I have Williams. This is very much they're a really good midfield team, and this is kind of where they live, but I just don't think they're going to get any higher than this year. If they can build on good results in 2026, maybe in 2027 they can get to 5th and start creeping up on that contender area. But I think Alpine at number 5 is, they finished last in the constructors in 25, but I think their efforts and the switch to a Mercedes power unit are going to pay off. I really think this car is going to surprise some people. Now, do I think it's going to win anything? No. Do I think it's going to get anywhere close to a top 5? No. Do I think it could be a consistent 10th to 15th, but closer to 10th every single week? Absolutely. I could see a lot of times them finishing 9-10, 10-11, 9-12, 9-11. You know what I mean? I think I can see them kind of living in that space, kind of always kind of getting 1 point here, 4 points there, that kind of thing. Number 4, my team, the back-to-back constructors champion and now reigning drivers champion, McLaren. I think that they're not a works team, and while they have the facilities and the people to be good, I think this year they're going to take a step back. Now, do I think they're going to claw their way back in the next couple of years? Yes. But for 2026, I think McLaren is going to be a very close 4th. Coming in at 3rd, I've got Red Bull. This isn't because of Max Verstappen. This is because of Isaac Hadjar. This is nothing against Isaac Hadjar, but he's not a great driver. Nobody ever succeeds in the second Red Bull car, and I think it could be the same old story again in 2026 where Max is doing all he can, but it's not enough to get them higher than 3rd in the constructors. All right, coming in 2nd in the constructors, I have Ferrari. Now, this is a huge turnaround for Ferrari because they've just been nowhere. They've been in the doldrums in 4th place for the last 3 years. So a 2nd place that's close in contention to Mercedes, that's a huge step forward. Good on you, Ferrari. But obviously, I think Mercedes is going to win the Constructors' Championship. I think that goes without saying. I think Mercedes, their car is by far the best car, and their engines are by far the best. I'm not super sold on their driver lineup. George Russell is okay, and I'm not super huge on Kimi Antonelli, but I cannot deny that technically their car is the best. Now, when you go to the top 10 drivers' championship predictions, that's where things are going to get interesting. So I think coming in at 10th, I've got Nico Hülkenberg driving for Audi. Now, I said that I don't think this Audi car is going to be any good. I don't, but Nico Hülkenberg is a good driver. And I think this could be a year where there's a lot of really bad cars and a lot of really good cars. There's nothing in between. So you could have 10th place be significantly behind 9th, but still be 10th place in the points. Coming in 9th, I've got Esteban Ocon of Alpine. He's the only Alpine driver in the top 10, but I think that car is definitely going to be in contention for points finishes, and he'll be firmly in 9th place. Coming in at number 9, I've got Carlos Sainz of Williams. This is the only Williams I've got in the top 10. I know what people are going to say. Alex Albon drives for Williams and he's a good driver. Yes, but I think it's going to be really tight in the midfield this year, and there's going to be a lot of up and down and inconsistent results, and I just have a feeling that Alpine and Audi might be able to bump their way into the top 10 in at least one driver. Coming in at number 7, I've got Lewis Hamilton of Ferrari. Now, Lewis Hamilton is one of the greatest drivers of all time. I'd argue he's probably 3rd best behind Schumacher and Senna. I will die on that hill. But Father Time is undefeated, and what can you say? His time has passed. He's not as competitive, he's not as consistent, and he's just struggled at Ferrari, and I don't think that's going to end. I think that the struggles are going to continue because it's Ferrari. And I don't think he's the kind of guy to win at Ferrari. So I have him coming in at 7th. Coming in at number 6, I've got Oscar Piastri of McLaren. He's a great driver, and McLaren's a great team, but I don't think this is going to be their year. And I think Lando's a better driver than him. Coming in at number 5, I've got Andrea Kimi Antonelli of Mercedes. I think he'll probably get a win this year, but I still don't think he's going to be anywhere close to his teammates, and you know how that is. At number 4, I've got Lando Norris. He'll probably get a couple of wins, maybe a win, maybe 1 or 2, and he'll have the team in firm contention because I think he's just that good, but the McLaren is still going to be 4th. At the end of the day, they're still going to be 4th. He's going to be 4th. The team is going to be 4th. Coming at number 3, I got Charles Leclerc of Ferrari. I think this is going to be one of those years where the team has the pace a lot sometimes, but really doesn't a lot of other times, and strategy mistakes kind of doom them from getting some better results in certain situations. But Leclerc is a great driver, and he's getting towards the end of his Ferrari contract, and I think he's going to have a pretty solid year. Now, here's the shock. Now, remember, everyone, I had Mercedes getting the constructors win. Coming in at second, George Russell of Mercedes. Yeah, but which means you can tell who I have winning the championship. But yeah, George Russell, he's a good driver, but I don't think he's a great driver. And Max Verstappen is a great driver. And just because he hates driving the car and doesn't think it's fun to drive doesn't mean he's not going to drive the hell out of it. So I have Max Verstappen of Red Bull winning the championship. He's a great driver. He can get anything in contention. Like, if he was to drive the Indy 500 in a Ganassi, I think he'd probably lap the field. He's just that good. So it's one of these things. George Russell's going to put up a good fight, but he's not Max Verstappen. All right, now let's get to some bold predictions. Calls for changes to the new regulations will start after the Australian Grand Prix has 3 total passes for position on track. It's going to be bad. It's going to be boring. It's going to be a parade where nothing happens, and everyone's like, oh my God, they got to go back to the old regs, or they got to do something. This is so boring. They've ruined Formula One, and it's just the internet's going to be on fire. You know, if the internet was a building, you'd be able to see the explosion from anywhere else on the planet. That's how big the explosion and the animus is going to be. So, yeah. Now here's another bold one. Max Verstappen is going to win more races than Ferrari and McLaren combined. He's going to win more races than both of those teams, but the lack of production from the second Red Bull car will ensure that Red Bull doesn't finish higher than third place in the constructors. I think he's going to have one of those years where he's just a beast, like last year. But this year, he's not going to have Lando Norris to win every week to prevent him from getting a championship. I think the other cars are going to be, this team wins one week, and then it's just going to be, he's going to go first or second every week, an occasional fourth, and everyone else is going to be slicing and dicing at the top of the order, depending on what week it is. All right, my next bold prediction, Fernando Alonso will announce his retirement at the end of the season. I could see him coming back because he's such a good driver, and I think he can drive the pants off of anything, but I think he's going to announce his retirement at the end of the year. Hell, he might do it in the middle of the season. He might say, yeah, this is going to be my last year. Driving this car is no fun, and I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go drive sports cars in Spain or something, whatever it is. I think that's going to happen. All right, my next one. At the end of the season, Renault is going to announce that the Alpine F1 team is up for sale. They're going to have pretty good results this year, and they're going to say the team is valuable, and it's time to move on because, Renault recently shuttered their hypercar program under the Alpine banner. They did that a couple of weeks ago. So I think they're going to be pulling back on this one as well, just because the economics of it doesn't really work. And they're spending too much money to be as bad at this as they are. All right, my next one. The gap between Cadillac and Aston Martin in the constructors will be extremely narrow, maybe even as few as 1 point. I mentioned this earlier. I think these two teams are going to be so close in points, just because, and not for the same reason. Like, Cadillac's going to be slow, but Aston Martin's going to be dysfunctional, and that might be worse. All right, and then my final bold prediction. I'm standing by my prediction that Cadillac isn't going to be the worst team in the constructors. Those last two go hand in hand. I do not believe for 1 second that they are going to be last in the constructors. Just not because I want it to be and I'm wish casting, but because I have a feeling that someone is going to get it that bad. That even though Cadillac isn't competitive and isn't fast, it's not going to matter. Because someone is going to be they're going to miss so badly that they're just going to be nowhere, Ooh, going for an hour and 14 minutes. My voice is failing me. All right, so that's the end of my Formula One preview, which is about as long as it was last year. I hope this one was more interesting than it was last year. But for those of you listening on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and everywhere else that podcasts are available, thank you. For those of you watching on YouTube, consider liking, hitting the bell icon to get notifications, and leave a comment to feed the algorithm. Next week, I don't know what we're going to do. You know, I haven't planned that far ahead. I might cover IndyCar. I might not. Either way, my name is H. James K. Thank y'all for tuning in. Until next time.